So welcome to session 2 of day 4 of Local Gov Camp 2020. And for this next session, we're going to ask you to step into the virtual dream yurt, in which self-proclaimed digital guru and head of digital operations at London Borough of Croydon, Dave Briggs, will lead a number of attendees or disciples, if you will, in a discussion looking at the digital skills required by those, I guess, doing digital within public sector organisations. Be prepared for some quite interesting information and knowledge, a lot of frippery and a slight bit of banter. Anyway, onwards into the dream yurt. That one, you know. Anyway, greetings everyone, and welcome to digital skills and support for doers, which will be hosted by resident digital guru Dave Briggs from inside his dream yurt. And I guess Dave's trying to sort of get together a cult of digital doers within the local gov space. And I guess I guess the session's what? Try and sort of establish what skills and support are required. It can't be, or is it skills and support that you need?
Well, I need help, obviously. That's well known. But yes, it's
support.
How do we, what are the skills and things that digital teams, but also I think the people that digital teams work with, what are those sort of skills that people are lacking and needing, and how do we fill those gaps?
Do you think it's probably wise? Sorry, where are you going? All right, well, can everyone take themselves? Would everyone mind sort of putting their cameras on and just saying hello? And
this will be highly interactive.
This is, yeah. Well, there you go. There's the interaction, the offset. That's it. Look, Craig's having a pint. Brilliant.
Water.
It's water. Of course it is. We believe you.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah. That's it. That's what Alex Higgins used to say. Excellent. Right. Well, Dave, why don't I hand over to you?
Yes.
Your dream year is primed.
Okay.
Away you go.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and thank you very much for giving me some of your time. And welcome to the dream yurt. You'll notice behind me just how delightful it is. And really, what the dream yurt is a safe space for us to share. Everything we need to do to figure out how we're going to make all the various bits of digital transformation happen that we really need to. Just to be clear, there are two rules within the dream yurt. First rule of dream yurt is that you do not talk about dream yurt, and the second rule of dream yurt is that clothing is optional. Just that you know that, just in case, so that we're all sort of comfortable with that situation. So what this is going to be all about, really, I've got very little to actually add or share or contribute myself to this session. I'm merely a facilitator within the shared space that is the yurt. And what we're going to be talking about is what the skills are, as I say, the things that people need to know to enable digital transformation to happen within our organisations. So, and these are both for the digital teams themselves, but it's also, I think, for those people that we're going to be working with within the services and things like that. So what we want to do really is to just sort of share some thoughts and ideas, for those of us that have been working in this space for a little while. Maybe we could talk about some of the things that we know keep coming up, that things aren't particularly things that people are, sometimes they're not as aware of as they need to be, and that kind of thing. And then we can get into some discussion around what are the ways that we might be able to sort of fill in some of those gaps. And it's pleasing to see from all the faces that are gazing adoringly at me at the moment on my screen that we do have some people with a vested interest in the digital skills agenda, which is good to know, because they can bring some of their experience to bear. Now, before we move on into the session to start discussing some of those ideas, which I think we could think of as the mind meld, is I think how we're going to think about that stage of the process. What I want to do first is to sort of indoctrinate you all and induct you into the dream yurt. And the way that we're going to do that is just to get everybody talking very quickly, is if you could all unmute yourselves, and then I'm going to bark out your names from the participants list, and you need to say what your name is, who it is that you're representing within the Dream Yurt, and also then what your favourite biscuit is. Okay, so that's what we'll do. So I'll go first. So I'm Dave Briggs. I'm from the London Borough of Croydon, and I like a bourbon cream. Nick Hill.
Nick Hill, representing the Public Sector Digital Transformation Forum and Local Gov Digital, and I'm quite partial to a Kit Kat.
Lovely. Sarah Mackey.
Hello, I'm Sarah Mackey from East Riding of Yorkshire Council, and I'm going to go for ginger nuts.
Ooh, nice. Alex Shield.
I'm Alex from Rushmore Borough Council, and I'm partial to a hobnob.
I have heard that. Alison Bellamy.
Hi, Alison Bellamy from London Borough of Hounslow, and I like the chocolate Leibniz. I think that
Nice.
Ooh, yeah. Continental. I like it. Craig Barker.
Greg Barker from Cumbria County Council, a wagon wheel.
Oh, old school. I love it. Andrew Walker.
Andrew Walker from Netcall, rich tea.
Boring. Andy Eden.
Andy Eden from Birmingham City Council, dark chocolate digestive.
Interesting choice. Lynn Kim.
Hi, I'm Lynn from Essex County Council. I'll go for Snickers.
Is that a biscuit?
No, chocolate, I guess.
Yeah, okay, we'll let you get away with it, but I'm not happy. Marion Ando.
Hi, Marion Ando from Hackney Council, and I like a shortbread biscuit.
Shortbread is a very good choice. Mike Ward.
Mike Ward from South Hams District Council and West Devon Borough Council. And my favourite biscuit is also a Choco Leibniz, but I'll go for the orange variety.
Oh, interesting. This is good stuff. Ronald McDonald.
Ronald McDonald from Helpful Digital, also known as Steph. I think I like those biscuits that are like half dipped in chocolate, you know, the wiggly ones. They got Novo Spritz. Is that what they're called?
Oh.
Yeah.
How do you ask for those in shops?
Fancy. Yeah.
Right. And then finally, because I'm getting bored of this, Claire Ryan East.
Hello, I'm Claire and I'm from Dorset Council, and I like a fig roll, if that counts as a biscuit. It's in the biscuit section in the supermarket.
It is. I find with a fig roll is that some of them are sort of crusty on the outside and they're quite nice, but sometimes they're a bit soft. And
I do like a bit of a crunch. Yeah.
Yeah. You need a bit of resistance, don't you? I think. Okay, so apologies to anyone who didn't get to share their favourite biscuit, but as I say, that really was dragging on a bit.
Maybe they can do it in the chat section, Dave. Maybe
sorry,
in
Nick?
the chat section. You don't want people to be left out. You've invited people into the Dream Yurt, and then you're already creating division within the Yurt.
Yes.
So if you want to share your biscuit, you know, I would say fig roll is verging on a cake as well. So, you know, feel free to cross boundaries.
It's in the Jaffa cake camp, isn't it, a bit?
Yeah. But all welcome in the Dream Yurt.
Thank you for that intervention, Nick. So if you want to share your biscuits in the chat, please do, and we'll be sure to ignore it. So we're gonna move on to I mean, it is great, I think, actually, that and it's testament, I think, to the likely success of this session that the fig roll discussion seems to be the most popular thing so far. We'll see if that remains the case. So what I wanted to talk about really was, as I said earlier, it's about sort of the skills, knowledge, capabilities that we need to have within our teams, in the broadest possible sense of that, when we're trying to make digital change happen. So, you know, there's a whole range of stuff, and we've been looking at this within Croydon in terms of trying to put together some kind of like learning thing for people in terms of like what's the very basics around sort of digital, so that when we get multidisciplinary teams of people together from across the council working to solve the problem, that we're all talking the same language, that when we say agile, we don't mean working from home, that kind of thing. And so But what we've been doing is we've just been running into problems really in terms of, well, actually, how we know what are the basics? Nobody seems to be able to agree on that. And also, you know, what's the best way of actually delivering that learning to people, particularly in, I think, these sort of times in which we find ourselves, where, you know, we can't get folk into a room and do some fun workshops and all of that kind of stuff. So that really is the problem we're trying to tackle in the next sort of 40 minutes or so. Does anybody want to share any of their thoughts on that, in terms of, you know, what are the things we think that are the really helpful things for people to know about digital when we're embarking on this kind of work, and where perhaps people are often coming up a bit short, you know, through no fault of their own, of course. Any takers to want to talk about that, or shall I pick on somebody? The eye of the Yurt is scanning. Felix, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's tricky, because I think that the amount that you want to tell somebody often depends on the scale of the project. So if you're kind of introducing somebody to something as a kind of a stakeholder on a project, you probably don't want to be going into as much detail about agile delivery and all the intricacies of it, and, you know, a lot of, and throwing masses and masses of terminology at them. Whereas people who, I mean, I don't know how different organizations do it, but in Hackney we tend to have product owners who are from services, and so that, you know, those are the types of people who you actually really need to really understand a lot more of the principles, a lot more of the terminology. They're often working with multidisciplinary teams, so you know, you need them to be kind of able to speak the same language. So I think, I guess I don't know whether or not you're looking at me a little suspiciously, so I don't know whether or not this might be a complete non-answer. But I guess, like, what you want people to know, I would say you want people to understand kind of the incremental delivery, testing things, user-centered design as a kind of minimum. But the kind of the higher levels of intricacy, the terminology, all that kind of stuff, I'd say you need to kind of think who's actually in your teams before you start trying to teach them that higher level.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and don't worry, I wasn't looking suspiciously. I just momentarily I was thinking about fig rolls again.
They make me suspicious too. So
yeah, exactly, yeah. It's this whole cake biscuit thing, you know. It's you know, we haven't even started talking about Jaffa cakes and, you know, all of that stuff, and VAT rules. Yeah, great. So I think you're right. There's definitely like a horses for courses thing here, isn't there? And you know, in terms of you know, those who are actually sort of working on the ground, actually doing the stuff, obviously need to know a bit more than those people who are only sort of involved around the edges and that kind of thing. Has anybody got examples of where perhaps a piece of work has and this, as I said, the Yurt is a safe space, so you know, everything said here will be recorded and shared on YouTube, but has anybody got anything that they can share around perhaps a project or something that didn't progress so well because of difficulties around, you know, whether it's people not fully understanding what was going on or weren't really entirely bought into what was happening? I'm sure there must be some. Don't make the eye of the
I'll go.
come out again.
So Craig Barker from Cumbria. And it's not one particular project, but it's the knock-on effect of COVID. We've heard a lot of organisations saying that COVID has accelerated their transformation programs. And in some cases, that's accurate. But when we look at the organisation as a whole, we're finding sub-teams, other teams, whether they're from community learning or adult social care, whatever, are doing their own digital transformation without even involving the digital team, whether that's due to us not having the capacity to involve them and them needing to move quickly due to COVID, or not understanding what we can provide. So there's a few new projects that have kicked off around Cumbria that have reached a level of completion which aren't fixing the plumbing, which we want to do, but instead adding new pieces of network to the plumbing. To solve it, I think we need to be a little bit better at articulating the digital strategy and making sure everybody's aware of that, so that these little mini projects do a little bit of their own governance and understand the vision and mission statement of the digital team, to perhaps maybe sit back or engage with us at a smaller, lower level. So there is a little, I don't like too much governance, but we need to help fix the plumbing rather than creating all these new, some teams using Zoom, some teams doing e-consultancy with another proprietary system, and all these new pieces of tech that are hitting the estate due to a lack of global understanding within the organisation.
So in other words, there's a sense there, is there, that by sort of maybe just sort of incrementally upping, the digital capability within the organisation, actually that could increase the breadth of what the digital team's able to sort of facilitate to happen, because they can let go a little bit more confident that people know what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Nice one. I managed to sum up there. We took ages to say in a short time.
Yeah, nice one. Cheers.
We can all learn from that, can't we? Mike Ward, you're sat there quite quietly. Have you got any? Plus, your picture is next to mine, which is why I saw you. Have you got any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, I was thinking similar to Craig, actually. And what came to mind was our comms team, for example, who are a group of people that need reining in from creating their own solutions rather than the corporate solutions. They'll go out and they'll need a quick fix for consultation, so they'll go off and do it on WordPress instead of the corporate website, or they'll start creating conversations on Facebook, and we're saying, yeah, but that's just, we're trying to channel shift people onto forums, and they're creating a whole new dialogue on Facebook that needs managing, and we're saying no, use that for broadcasting. If they want to engage with us, use Facebook Messenger, or just signpost them to a forum. So every time you sort of cut off one avenue, they go and find another one. So it is quite tricky, really. But we are beginning to sort of make them aware now that we're going to rein them in, and created a corporate communications document that they didn't actually produce in a way. So it kind of sets some boundaries on what they can do, what they should do, and what they shouldn't do, without creating more work for people.
Interesting, good stuff, Mike.
Council streaming's another one, sort of streaming to YouTube. They come up with quite a Heath Robinson solution that then needs IT involvement to babysit, and things like that. So you need to keep a control of those.
Yeah, certainly control can help, can't it? Just to respond very quickly to a question that's put up in the chat by Pauline there, asking whether Dan Slee was invited to the Yurt. Unfortunately, Dan Slee is banned from the Yurt. There were some wandering hands, basically. He can't keep them to himself.
That's a slur and a libel, Dave, and I won't have it.
He has been banned. Well,
no.
As the victim of those hands, then I'm saying, I don't really care about that.
Unfortunately, Pauline, that bit of the recording seems to have gone a bit haywire. So it will be hearsay.
I was just thinking the very same thing as Pauline. I mean, I'm in IT, don't get me wrong. I think everyone should be controlled within an inch of their lives. But there comes a point at which you've got to face the fact that further attempts to control just increase the risk of chaos.
I think there is. I think, as always, is a balance, isn't it? I think there.
We do need to find common ground here, though, because this is going to be this is like where we're at. Seriously, in the community, the comms people are responding to everyday communication they're having with people in the community, and if IT is going to say that's a problem, then that's a problem for the community.
I think that it's a case of making sure that we show. I think you started off by kind of maybe I got a bit of the wrong end of the stick, Dave, but you started off talking about like kind of how we get people to understand kind of the different ways that we want to do things. And I think that one of the things I think that is really important is that we don't just go around telling people we do things in a we respond to people's needs, we do things in this iterative way, and then they see it and they're kind of like, yeah, but this looks a little bit like the same thing that we always got. I think there's a real imperative to show that we're doing things differently. And I think that something like the whole debate around shadow IT, obviously there's a need to for maintenance, for security, for data protection, to have some kind of standardization. But if we can show at the same time that we're learning from the existence of shadow IT, we're making sure that when we see it, we explain to people why it might not be the right thing to do. We provide them with a kind of an alternative, but we also really try and understand the needs that led to that arising in the first place. You know, if people are just having a shortcut to talk to people on Facebook, why is Facebook better than the forms that we're asking them to use? You know, what's the, oh, sorry, shadow IT is, sorry, that might be a bit of jargon. It's basically when people in different services that aren't your IT service go out and procure their own IT. So, you know, using Facebook in a way that, you know, using some functionality of Facebook might be one. Classic one is like you know,
Dropbox.
Yeah, you use SurveyMonkey, or you use some easy thing off the internet because
why don't they just all use Teams? Well, because none of their users are in Teams and don't know what it is. And
Zoom is our corporate sponsor. I think you have to be thrown out of the Yurt for saying that.
I am a big advocate of using Zoom where appropriate in the public sector, and I've made my feelings to the Zoom PLC US Inc. organization perfectly clear as to how they could facilitate that better than they're doing so far. Don't worry.
Can I just say for now that other video sort of conferencing technology is available, but they're not compatible.
But they're not sponsoring the event.
They're not compatible with the liberal attitudes of the year. It's fair to say. Okay, I want to bring in now, if I may, our clown-based friend, Mr. Ronald McDonald, who I understand has some experience of trying to teach public sector folk how to use the internet, and whether he's got any views on some of this stuff.
Well, not particularly. I suppose I'm more inclined to sort of agree with Felix than Mike, I think, on it. I mean, I remember Dave, before the steel entered your soul and you became an IT manager, you were quite up for like little WordPress sites around on the edges of corporate infrastructure and that kind of thing. I suppose the conversation just got me thinking, is it the systems and the plumbing that we're trying to control and limit? Or is it, is that actually the problem? Is it about control? Or is it just that we don't have kind of the right understanding in place about, like Felix says, you know, what are the risks of using shadow IT? Or, you know, if you're using your spreadsheet, you know, what are the alternatives to just using your Excel spreadsheet to track COVID cases and that kind of thing? You know, just perhaps just trying to get people to think about, not kind of dent their confidence to try new things. So I think that's the big thing about digital skills, is that a lot of people feel it's an inaccessible kind of realm. You can't hope to understand IT. You can just fight the IT department. And I think that feels like it's been that way for 10 years or more. It'd be nice to sort of work out what's going to change that dynamic, so we're not just fighting between people who are trying to do things in their day jobs and IT departments who are just trying to keep control, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, I feel it, if I'm honest with you folks, I mean, I don't think this is my fault. I think it is yours, but we do seem to have sort of drifted quite far from the initial idea that we were supposed to be talking about here, which was the can't even control my own Yurt. This is a nightmare. But it's not so much really around, sort of allowing people sort of access to stuff. I think where I was coming into this from really was more around, you know, when we're working on digital projects and stuff, both within our own teams, within the digital team, because we know that not everybody knows all the things they need to know all the time, and of course perhaps they can't. But also with the people that we're working with, in order to make those projects success, that we need everybody to be on the same page in terms of, you know, just the basics of what we're talking about here. And I don't think it's necessarily, for me, when I've been thinking about this, always about the specifics of using certain bits of technology, but actually it's more about understanding, you know, the high level principles of why we would choose to design something around a user need rather than a business requirement, you know, why we might want to deliver things in an iterative fashion rather than in one big go, and why we might want to think about how data can be managed and kept safe, but in a proportionate way that enables us to actually still do useful things with it. That was the bit that we, I mean, I totally get that there obviously are issues there around when people aren't particularly technology literate that sometimes they can go off and do things which aren't always helpful for one reason or another. But as I say, I think my focus coming into this conversation, and maybe it is that's not something that anybody wants to talk about, was just you know, what are the skills we need in our teams when we're actually sort of doing this. So so Fig Lady, Claire, have you got any thoughts on that in terms of some of the projects you've been working on and the skills that people bring into that, and the knowledge, and what the things are that, in your experience, people really need to make these things a success?
Well, just from listening to what you're saying, it feels as though a lot of it is to do with the culture and relationships. So what you were just saying then about whether we go for a user-centered design or what suits the service, that is a cultural thing, and I think it is changing. It is where we are, but also whether people go out and procure their own thing, like the shadow IT that you were talking about, Felix, or whether they know or have those relationships with the digital team to be able to say, I know someone who will know, and talk to them and have that whole culture. You know, so the skills people have are that they know where to go to get something rather than going externally, and they know. Oh,
I'm sorry, the Yurt's guard dog has seen something it dislikes. I will mute myself while I'm.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got digital adoption service within our digital team. And that had been a kind of community voluntary thing where we got people in libraries to help other people get online, things like that. But we've turned that into a much more structured thing and had it internally to try and improve skills and knowledge that way. But I know for a fact that a lot of people throughout the council, where I am, aren't using Teams, they aren't online, they aren't meeting with their managers at least once a week or anything like that. So I think this situation has exposed a lot of the issues with skills, with access, and with the culture. You know, what managers are prioritizing in terms of how to keep communication open with their teams, or how to encourage them to use the kind of standard systems, you know, whatever we use for e-forms, rather than going out and procuring something, you know, stuff like that. So to me, it feels as though it's deeper than just saying what skills do people have or what do they need, but it's how we encourage that and how we form those relationships to make sure that people know where to get them. A bit rambly.
Not at all. No, there was plenty of high fibre content in that response. Thank you for that, Claire. And an answer that's eminently dunkable in a cup of tea. We've got the Chocolate Hobnob Brigade in Hannah Buckley here from Kent. Hannah, have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I think it needs to be a top-down solution, really. I think that's the problem. I think that you entirely right that it's about the communication and the culture, but that needs to come from the top, and that understanding it shouldn't necessarily be the digital teams pushing digital transformation, but actually it should be further up the line, that they should be going, actually, are you doing the right thing? Are you offering as much as you can? Can you offer more? What if you can offer more, how can you offer more in a way that suits the customer needs just as much as it needs the service needs? Because we all know there's all those complicated back office processes that happen all the time that don't need to be so complicated, and if we could get our hands on them, we can get involved with them to make them much less tricky and much simpler, which will instantly get you buy-in from the staff members on the ground, because if it's a simpler process, they want to follow the simpler process.
That does seem to make a bit of sense. I mean, whether we're sort of saying that you know, should some sort of digital sort of confidence kind of sort of program maybe be a part of like the corporate induction or something like that, where people actually have to do it before you know, they can get involved in stuff. I think that's an interesting idea. Alex, you said something in the chat earlier. I was looking for some biscuit stuff, but accidentally read something sensible that you'd said, which was that it's more about sort of attitudes than skills necessarily. Did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so I'm working with a couple of different service teams at the moment, and in, you know, one is going really well and the other one is more of a challenge. And the difference between them, you know, is more attitudes than behaviours. It's more the fact that one is far more thinking about the user of their service and is looking to bring their, you know, the manager of that team is looking to bring their team into the work and not make all the decisions themselves, be more empowering, not looking for perfection straight away, you know, and all those attitudes that you need for the agile behaviours to work. Whereas the other one is almost the complete opposite. You know, they're not inviting their team into the work. They're making all those decisions themselves, and it's all about how they can protect their team and the way that they work from any change. And there's just no, at the moment, there's just no space to thrive for those agile behaviours to thrive because the attitudes aren't in place.
Interesting, good stuff. And do you think some of those, if it's about attitudes and that kind of thing, are those, can people be trained out of those, or you know, do we just have to try and avoid these people?
I don't think we can necessarily avoid them. Certainly, if they're in particular management positions, and people want change to happen in that service. I've yet to find a better way of a mix between a bit of a war of attrition, showing them how others are getting better success from working in a different way, and a bit of leadership to act as the stick to move them along.
But maybe threatening them with forced sort of custody inside of my dream yurt with me for a certain length of time would be enough to persuade those. I'm going to bring Ollie Hellis in at this stage, if that's all right, if only because I want to know, what is that? Is that a griffin? What
it is, it's a griffin. It's the Somerset County Council logo.
Nice. And are there many griffins at large in the county?
There are less these days.
Right.
You know, but it's an important thing.
It is. And if we were to decide, if a griffin was to be attacking you, you know, whilst you're out on a walk, and you had to try and calm it down by feeding it biscuits, what kind of biscuit would you use to please a griffin?
Well, my personal choice is definitely the Oreo. The variety across the whole platform, the fact that the majority of them are vegan.
Yeah,
it covers, you know, a multitude of kind of things. You know, it tends to help a chocolate lover. You can get the chocolate covered ones all the way through to, you know, birthday celebration ones, and then the crazy kind of different flavors. Yeah, it works.
And you think a griffin would appreciate that?
I don't see why not. Who wouldn't?
Fine. I've got a very brief anecdote about Oreos, in that I bought, to please my daughter the other day, I bought a packet of the double cream Oreos. Have you seen these?
Yeah, double stuff.
Yeah, so I took two of them apart and then combined the creamy ends of them both to create a quad Oreo, which I gave to my daughter. She then licked all of the cream out of it and returned the two rather soggy bits of biscuit back to me, expecting me to eat them. And for shame, I did. Ollie, what do you think about all this digital skills stuff?
I think it's important. You know, I deal with digital. So basically, I'm the digital development officer for Somerset Libraries. And, you know, when I talk about digital, it's not so much about just communication and spreadsheets and things like that. It's about things like 3D printers. It's about Raspberry Pis. It's about, you know, any new piece of technology, robotics. And, you know, I try and put digital technology into our library so that customers, members of the public can come in and use them. Obviously, in COVID, that's taken a slight dent, but we provide technology that schools can use. Now, across that platform, I have everything from management across to frontline staff who have been librarians for a very, very long time. And they still pain for the days where they had a little piece of paper that allowed them to say what a book was and who had borrowed it and all of that kind of thing. So I totally agree with what was said earlier, is the fact that it is very much about attitude. Attitude is absolutely key, no matter what technology you're trying to, or in fact, any new way of working. If you've got somebody who is positive about the project, absolutely you embrace them. They will learn the skills that they need as you go along. Anybody can learn that. It's like learning anything. So I tend to be overly enthusiastic, and I try and make it as pain-free as I possibly can about whatever the piece of technology that I'm trying to get them to do. You know, try to introduce 3D printing. I've now got to a point where I have got 3D printers in several of our libraries. It's there, it is absolutely running without me having to micromanage it. It is completely now over to them. A customer will contact a library, they will be filtered through, the information will be gathered, and the design will be printed off, and they will pick it up and away they go. And I've now got to a point where I've actually eliminated myself from having to deal with that. And yeah, I think that system can be rolled out across any platform that you're trying to work on. Internally, externally, it's just key, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you can achieve that with 3D printers, Ollie, I'd like you to have a go with our HR system, if that's possible, because that would be.
Yeah, if you just got to find a way of making it as enthusiastic as you possibly can. So no, you see, your attitude's all wrong.
You're not the first person to say that, Ollie. You're not the first person to say that.
Shame on you. Shame
I
on
know,
you. Bringing
right?
your Yurt into disrespect.
Well, yes, it is a Yurt of disrepute, in fact.
Yeah.
Alison Bellamy, you've been sat there quite quietly. I think you need to tell us about your opinions.
Hello. Yeah, so where to start, really? I just seen something in the chat that was interesting, and from Ronald McDonald on the possibly the who's just disappeared. So I do think that having centralized IT can be a problem, and I've seen different perspectives and different experiences. I've just recently moved from Kingston Sutton shared digital and IT service to London Borough of Hounslow, and some of the technology can play a part as well. So in Kingston Sutton, we rolled out Google, and there was almost immediately a separate community of people who wanted to help other people adopt the new software, and Google apps are so easy to use, and that was a criticism as well as a plus point. In Hounslow, we're using Office 365, and that transition, well, we're not really, we're using Microsoft stuff. And I find when talking to colleagues outside of digital IT, or even within digital IT, that can be a barrier for people to learn and do stuff, because it's more complicated than it should be. SharePoint's got some good stuff, but people don't really wake up in the morning thinking, oh, you know what, I want to do a course on SharePoint. So we've got to change how we present training and how we try to bring up people's skills and give them the confidence. I've spoken to heads of services who say, oh, I'm so thick, I can't use it. And it's not that they're thick, it's that the technology hasn't been designed with them in mind. So trying to beat out of them their lack of confidence and their criticism of themselves, and make them enthusiastic and make them want to use it for different things, but they don't really understand what it can do. And if we just say, do you want to learn how to use SharePoint? They're going to say, well, why would I want to do that? That's not something that excites me. So we need to talk to them in different terms and not talk about the technology, but would you like to learn how to be more efficient at blah, or would you like to learn how to do this more effectively? Did you know there were these features? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's funny that you use that example, because my boss and I once went to give we'd given a slot at like the senior management team at Croydon to talk about digital, and halfway through, a few people were saying that that they were quite enjoying it. I didn't really talk a lot, I have to say, but they were quite enjoying it. But partially that was because they said they thought we were going to be talking to them about printers and things like that. It's just like, well, why on earth would we do that? But that was something that people had some fear about. Now, Time's running on. I wanted to bring in, if I could, Swain and Pauline, just because they've been involved in something, and you know, this is tinged with sadness a little bit, because there was a great chap known to a few of us, I suspect, on this call, called John Popham, who very sadly passed away, I think, last week. But John did a huge amount of work, you know, spreading the good word around digital, you know, skills and what can be achieved with it all, largely sort of in the community and voluntary sector. But he did touch in local government quite a bit as well, and he did so much for everyone. And one of the things that he started off was a kind of a web show to look into some of the technology things that people can help with. And I think Swain and Pauline are sort of continuing to carry the torch for John on that. So Swain, did you want to talk a little bit about that very quickly?
I'll let Pauline go first.
Yep, by all means. Yep, however.
Yeah, John asked us to get involved about, we've done 20 shows now. The last one was after John passed. And he just wanted to get everybody involved in digital inclusion and you know, find as many people, reach as many people as possible. It's on YouTube. It's on Mondays at 12 to 1, and we've had guests on, and we want to continue it going, because John wanted to get as many people involved in telling their story as possible, so everybody here has a story to tell and can be shared, and that he found that as one of the most powerful ways of getting people involved in things. So all the human side of us is what John was trying to reach and spread. And if we can do more of that, then we'll be more John. Swain.
Absolutely. I mean, John's idea for the what he called the Dr. Tech show, and slight humorous means, because that's what some BBC local radio person called him, so he decided to call the show that. He really had the idea.
Just to be clear now, you know, neither Swain nor Pauline are qualified doctors. We ought to put
no, that's absolutely right. We should,
just in case they should try and operate on any of it.
Nor are we social workers, marine staff, or town planners either. No, as far as I know.
I have an honorary doctorate, Dave, actually, but there you go.
Is that right? Well, there we go. Even so, you're not operating on me, Pauline.
Yeah, it's a bit dodgy, isn't it? It's still a bit dodgy. Anyway, just to say that John's original idea for this show was to help people during lockdown specifically, who might have challenges in getting online to improve their own lives during that period. And although the focus has probably moved on to the people who support those people, because it's hard to reach by YouTube people who are not connected to the internet, we found. It is all about finding the stories of what has worked in individual cases. That was what John was all about, and trying to feed those stories into the likes of this conversation, which, you know, the corporate side of organizations needs to be a bit more flexible. The on the ground, enthusiastic, very digital, very newly thinking people need to be a bit more pragmatic, and they need to meet somewhere, either to one end of the spectrum or the other, or in the middle. And it's up to us all as professional people to find that space and do the best we can in it, remembering that resources are always limited, and the more fancy, nice, new things that you do, probably on average, fewer you can do across the patch. And that's, you know, just that point of standardization originally was to be in some sense efficient and take the worst bits of risk out. Now, obviously, if you want to go out and be risk taking and so on, you've got to make the case for that and get people to agree with you, even the people who would rather you didn't. And that's the trick with digital.
Great
and
stuff.
I fully believe that John would agree with me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would. And I think, you know, that I think one of the lessons that we can probably take from you know, a lot of the stuff that John did, but actually the Dr. Tech stuff as that's carrying on, I'm sure that one of Pauline or Swain would bung a link in to the chat for those that want to take a look at how that works. But there's a little bit of the JFDI kind of attitude, I think, to that, and perhaps I do wonder that, you know, one of the things that we may well have learned from lockdown, and suddenly the fact that everybody's now able to do whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever the hell it is that people actually use, that actually we're a lot more used to doing this, you know, and the fact that, you know, Nick Hill, with his you know, renowned inability to organise anything, has been able to get a whole week's worth of great learning activities up and running, shows that actually this probably can be done. And it's like within our network, whether we think of that as being like the local gov digital network or maybe a little bit wider, but within all of our networks, there's probably enough people that know enough stuff about, you know, about things that actually, you know, just running a quick half-hour session on writing a user story or doing a quick, you know, 45 minutes on, you know, the best way to run a virtual workshop or do you know what I mean? Any of that kind of stuff that we ought to be able to, I would have thought, within a community come up with fairly little effort, a pretty comprehensive, you know, almost curriculum, if you like, that we could get all sorts of people involved in and taking part in. Just as soon as we've decided.
One thing we should do is to look for all the examples of precisely what you've just said that already exist and use them. Actually,
true. No, absolutely, absolutely, fabulous. Now, is there anybody that I haven't picked on that feels the need to say something? Because we've got a few minutes where you can where you might be able to do that if you choose. Andy Eden, you've not said a lot.
Yes, I'm a thinker, not a talker. So
fair enough.
But I was I've got a bit of a project and programs perspective on it, and the work we do at Birmingham, it's quite fledgling in many ways, but we have got some digital stuff going on that's linked to our attempts to get into agile delivery as well. And I'm sitting here thinking about how we need to sort of protect these teams that are doing these new things for us, because what happens is they're hitting roadblocks where existing processes, we're quite process driven, and yeah, they'll come up against things like service management rules and regulations and things like that, and it can really stifle progress and that sort of stuff. So when you're setting out on digital work and agile transformation, then you need to have a sort of safe space for people to be able to work in, so that they don't get bogged down in that kind of everyday stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah, no, I think that's that's a really good sort of perspective on things. Now, the man that professed a love of rich tea biscuits earlier on, Andrew, you're the I think probably our sole sort of supplier representative, along with Ronald, of course. You work for Netcall. How do you find? Do you sometimes find that, you know, the ability for organisations that buy your products that perhaps are sometimes held back by some of these issues around internal capability and understanding and that kind of thing?
I think what's really interesting, just listening to people's stories, is that the single difference, I think, is where if projects are led from the top and there's a buy-in across the whole organisation, then they're likely to be far more successful. And I think also the enthusiasm and confidence from people that the project's going to be successful from the outset makes it happen a lot quicker and gets that buy-in. Where you've got people that are involved in projects that are sceptical to what the outcome's going to be, because maybe experiences that they've had within the organisation of not delivering, etc., then I think you're struggling straight away, and those tend to sort of be projects that get distracted or slowed down. So I think it's very much, getting everybody bought into the direction, not being afraid to do things differently, not just follow what everybody else is doing, and having that sort of continuous enthusiasm, and to be able to actually show results as soon as you can as well, because that gives confidence back that the output's working.
Good stuff. Yeah, no, thank you. No, that's a really, really sort of pertinent point, I think, to be making around all of that stuff. So we probably have to start bringing things to a bit of a close. There's quite a bit of chat going on as well on the side there, where there's some interesting bits and pieces going on in there. So thanks everybody for coming along to this, both in terms of the format. I've never allowed anyone to enter my Yurt before, and I've found it a not uncomfortable experience. So, if there is demand for more Yurt-based activity, then do let myself and Mr. Hill know. I think there's it's giving Pauline the jitters by the look of it, but the I don't know whether a slightly informal sort of chat approach to this stuff is a useful thing. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Let us know. But anyway, but there's loads of stuff I think for us to think about there, both as a sort of a wider community and things. And we'll take this forward. If anybody is interested in this though,